Kevin, thank you so much for being here.
So exciting.
So you've got the Kevin Pollak Chat Show. Can you tell me a little bit about it?
Well, what would you like to know? I can tell you everything about it.
What is the format? What do you do?
It's a one-on-one long-form interview. Doesn't really exist beyond the length of, say, a Charlie Rose in traditional media. So I wanted to open it up 90 minutes, 2 hours often with the guest. Questions coming live from the live viewers into the process as well through Twitter or the chat room that's on the site, kevinpollakschatshow.com. And we stream live every Sunday, 3 o'clock West Coast, 6 East Coast. Check your time zone beyond that. And then it's up on iTunes the next day, as well as on the site's archives. And the idea is to try to gather as many of these long-form interviews as possible. We've now built a library of coming up on 110 interviews, ranging from filmmakers like Jane Campion and Jason Reitman to famous faces from music, from stand-up comedy, from acting, actresses, sometimes outside my comfort zone, captains of industry such as Elon Musk, one of the founders of PayPal, as well as now Tesla Motors. And the idea is to actually get to know these people instead of the short form interviews that exist on TV.
Why did you, it seems like part of your inspiration is that you really want to get involved with who these people are and what ticks behind them. I watched your interview with Fred Savage, and he was just so personable, and you feel like you really get to know the person after a while.
That's the idea, yeah. I've always been a huge fan of reading autobiographies and always fascinated by people's journey. How did you get from there to here? I think there's a great thirst and a huge audience for that sort of information. And those interesting people who are willing to share the ups and downs and ins and outs of their particular journey, there's a great benefit for the guest to be able to talk about these things, and a tremendous benefit, obviously, for the audience who are genuinely fascinated with these people to begin with.
Why did you decide that digital was the way to go for this vision?
Well, I didn't want there to be any sort of restraints other than the ones that I designed. So there should be no censorship, there should be no time restraints, there should be a comfort zone for the guest to open up and talk about anything and everything. And the first thing I wanted to do was to do away with an audience, do away with a pre-interview, which is a big part of the talk show world. You basically end up auditioning your anecdotes the night before with a segment producer on the phone, whether it's Letterman or Conan or whoever. That's the way those shows have always been done. I've done them all as a guest. Charlie Rose was the only one that there was no pre-interview. And I felt like, oh, I see, he did his own research. Well, that's rather novel.
Yeah.
So I have a great producer who does the research, and then he'll put together a 30, 40 page, sometimes research document that I'll then put together up to 10, 15 page dossier, as I call it, on the guest, and we'll go from there. And it's just a tremendous amount of background. I love an interview when a guest says, how did you find that out? Those are the moments I live for. And it's not about scandalous, how did you find that out, as much as it is a moment in their journey that hasn't really been talked about.
Is there anything else, you've talked about so far, I want to try to crystallize your decision to go digital, which seems like, the lack of time constraints, the lack of censorship.
Yeah, and also there's an audience that, I feel like traditional media has sort of closed ranks on their desire and ability to reach an audience. It used to be in the movies, oh, they tell you everything that happened in the trailer. Why are they these various complaints throughout time are just further and further proof that traditional media has a very set way of marketing and advertising and reaching an audience. And it seemed so much more organic, so much more, did you hear? version of reaching an audience. The internet represented the sort of ultimate, if you build it, they will come. If it's good enough, people will find out about it. And you just have to be patient and wait for the audience to find you. And sometimes in the case of a viral video, it's within an hour or a day. And then in other cases, we did the chat show live. I think we did it only 6 weeks before we ended up front page above the fold of the LA Times, sorry. But for us, to get column 1 of the front page of the LA Times, the only way someone from media gets column 1, even in a rag like the LA Times, is if I kill someone. So the fact that without any marketing team, without any publicist, without any traditional media tools of marketing and letting people know we were doing this show, we were in such a high platform of marketing, a publicist could have never got me that position. And it was just a matter of, hey, did you hear? Hey, did you hear? This thing is happening. And the quality of guests that we were able to get now, to spend 2.5 hours with Eddie Izzard. We just spent 2 hours with Billy Bob Thornton. You know, we were able to actually hear more about these people's journey and actual thoughts and real feelings about life and their particular path, and gain insight that's never been available. I like to wave the flag of, this is the most in-depth interview this person has ever given. But when you spend a couple hours with them, that ends up what happens.
It's true.
Yeah.
So you have guests from all over Hollywood, and there's also a lot of Hollywood now, as you talked about earlier today, participating in original digital content. What do you think is inspiring them to participate more and changing, perhaps developing the perception of all of the advantages of digital-only content?
I think it's creative control and ownership that interests a great deal, a great many of us. I come from stand-up comedy originally, where I had complete creative control. I live and die by my own wits on stage with an audience that in real time, you talk about the power of Twitter, in real time of stand-up comedy, the audience is telling you moment by moment whether what you've created is any good or not. And then from stand-up, I got into films where I had no control at all. I would read a great script, and then many months later the film would come out not at all representing what I had signed on to. And I had no input and no control and no real place other than to be a gun for hire. And although doing movies is living out a childhood dream, and I haven't quit the day job, I have 2 films coming out shortly, Red State from Kevin Smith and the Big Year with Steve Martin, Jack Black, and Owen Wilson, and many others. You know, it's only so fulfilling. And I think the internet, as a new network, as Kiefer pointed out, it's the largest network in the world now. And brands and advertisers are just now starting to acknowledge, all right, let go of the old numbers tracking systems. Let's realize and acknowledge that there are niche audiences that we want, that these famous people are now coming from traditional media to new media and bringing with them.
What part of what advertisers are looking for online, I think one of the advantages they see is the interactive, the ability to be interactive with their consumers, their customers, their potential customers. You must maintain a lot of relationships with all of the questions that your audience gives you for your guests. How do you maintain those relationships?
Well, if you write to contact@kevinpollakschatshow.com, we read all the emails. There's a big staff, and we incorporate as many of the audience's questions and insights. A segment at the top of the show called Ask Kevin. They can ask me anything. And then we take their live questions during the interview. And then there's other participation. They can play the Larry King game and possibly win a T-shirt. I like to involve them as much as possible. And in terms of keeping in contact with them, it's as much as they're willing to reach out to us, we're happy to communicate back. There's no ongoing effort to check in with anyone on a weekly basis or anything. I don't want to suggest that. but it's an open dialogue. We just aren't the first to speak.